Welcome to Vinted with Scout Driscoll. Come along with me on my journey into the wine world, where I share thoughtful conversations with wine industry leaders. Get ready for marketing insights from branding and design to sales and social media, and the answer to the ultimate question: what moves wine? Hi everyone, I'm Scout Driscoll, founder of Vint Studio and host of Vinted, where we talk about all things wine design and sales. Past episodes include conversations with veteran wine label designer Nicole Walsh, who brings 26 years of experience to Napa Valley, and the founder of Vint Social, virtual wine experience expert Sarah Mall. I definitely recommend you go back and check out those shows. On today's episode, we'll be talking all about marketing with one of my favorite wineries, the marketing director and VP of marketing for Tank Garage Winery, Ed Feuchuk. But before we dive into our conversation, here's a quick note from our sponsor. This episode is brought to you by Vint Wine Branding and Design, where rich storytelling meets smart design. At Vint, our studio goes beyond the label, guiding wine brands through strategy-rich branding and packaging evolution. Our work with Cooper's Hawk has helped them grow to the nation's largest wine club with over 450,000 members. You can learn more about Vint at vint.studio, and for a free label audit for your brand, email us at hello@vint.studio. So today's guest, Ed Feuchuk, is a marketer and mistake maker with over 15 years of experience building innovative DTC wine brands. As a general manager and VP of marketing for Farm Collective Napa Valley, Ed has led creative, strategic, and technical initiatives for brands like Tank Garage Winery, Cole Winery, Regusci Winery, and T-Vine Winery. With a passion for authentic experiences and Renegade marketing, Ed and his work have been featured in Adweek, New York Times, Wine Spectator, and Playboy. Ed, welcome to the show.
I am beyond grateful and excited to be here. I am a huge fan of Vinted. I've been listening since day one, and now I'm fully here, and I cannot believe it.
Thank you. So for those of you who don't know, Tank Garage Winery is my favorite kind of renegade counterculture wine brand coming out of Napa Valley. As a designer, their labels are fresh, fun, rebellious, always super, super graphic, sometimes literally. And, they're not afraid to be themselves. They swear. Their space is amazing. Their staff is fucking awesome. So I definitely encourage you to check it out. As a design nerd and label fanatic, of course, I admire just how revolutionary Tank has really been in design in Napa. So thanks so much for being here today to talk about some of those things with me today, Ed.
Cool.
I'd like you to know too, in my notes for today's episode, I usually write down questions I'd like to ask people. Today's episode notes just say welcome to Ed and then geek out. But so just to get us started, I'm such a sucker for counterculture brands, and I love what you've built at Tank Garage Winery. I'd love for you to tell my audience and our audience a little bit more about the winery and also kind of your personal involvement in building the brand.
Sure. So for the uninitiated, Tank Garage Winery is a little direct-to-consumer only winery located in a 1930s gas station in the Calistoga, or the town of Calistoga, which is in the northern part of Napa Valley. We've been open since 2014, and we're mostly known for sort of our irreverent sort of marketing and labels and blends, and the fact that our wines are one-off, so they're constantly changing. We never make a successive vintage of anything. We never use a label or tell a story multiple times. And that's sort of where we've been successful in being the black sheep here in Napa Valley. My personal involvement goes way back. So Tank Garage Winery was started by a guy named James Harder, who is a guy who came down from Canada about, probably 30 years ago at this point, in the wine and wine marketing space. He and his wife created a winery called Cole Winery, probably 25 years ago at this point. And this sort of emerged as his garage project, right? He's a very creative mind. I always kind of say he's like the Don Draper of Tank Garage Winery, not in the sense that he's like some alcoholic misogynist, but in that sense that he is the creative visionary, the North Star that saw the opportunity, that was inspired, that had the dream to build this weird little gas station thing that was experimental and celebrated misfits and rebels, and created this culture and this company of creative people. So I've been working with James, doing projects with him since 2008, and then working directly with him since 2010. And we've worked on a variety of projects. So my involvement with Tank goes back to the initial steps, which is we were building a winery called T-Vine Winery down the road. This is probably 2012, 2013. There was this old gas station in Calistoga that everyone's known about. You've lived here for, 20, 30, 40 years, this place. We found out it was coming available. Our first instinct was like, that's cool. We're into that sort of stuff. Let's just get it and then see what sort of naturally spools out of that. So, been here helping, define the brand, helping hone the brand. It's one of those things where I can't say, and we had this like specific business plan, which is this is what it's going to be. Here's who's going to target. Here's our sort of, market strategy. We always just say our business plan is to do cool shit and see where that takes us. And so it's been cool to see this brand be really successful and resonate with so many people. And it's been really rewarding to me because my thumbprint is on it because I've contributed a lot to it. So that's me, and that's Tank Garage Winery.
Yeah. And I think when it comes to, any type of renegade or counterculture brand, especially in like the broader context of what Napa Valley means to people, across the country, across the world, it takes a lot of courage, and I think, as much as people who love the Napa culture and they love the fantasy of wine country, I think they're already tapped into that. But there's this whole target audience that might love really great fine wines that lands in that counterculture segment of the world. And I love that you guys have tapped into bringing the authenticity and access to a whole different audience. What inspired you guys to do it so differently? I mean, is it just, your interpersonal, obviously, like you said, it wasn't something that was, well, we read the Nielsen ratings and it said that people who wear black t-shirts don't drink enough Napa wine. But, what really inspired you guys to take that risk, or really just risk being yourselves in the Valley?
I think it's just what you said there. So we are inspired, like we grew up in an era celebrating these renegade brands. So you're talking about old school Nike, the kind of marketing that Apple did in the 80s, maybe Supreme these days. These sort of like counterculture renegade brands are things that are really cool and inspiring to us. And we also love wine, and traditionally, especially here in Napa Valley, and I imagine in a lot of traditional wine regions, is there's a playbook, right? If you want a winery, it looks like this. You name it like this. The bottles look like this. You market it to people like this. You serve it to people like this. And I think realistically, it just didn't jive as much with our value system and what we think is cool, right? Like we're these people that like punk rock and like motor culture and sneakers and stuff like that, but we're doing this really formal thing and we're not really pursuing our passion. So when you talk about just like being ourselves and sort of leaning into the things that we're passionate about, that's how sort of Tank became what it is. And I think it's what also keeps Tank fresh and exciting, because the brand evolves and changes as we sort of evolve and change. And we always kind of talk about this as a brand, which is like, if you look at like really great artists, so like look at maybe like David Bowie, right? That's the classic example. So David Bowie wasn't just like the David Bowie that came out initially. He didn't just milk that. He constantly evolved and changed and shifted and reinvented himself. Like he could have been Ziggy Stardust forever, but he was like, this is me in a phase. I'm now interested in this. Come along with me. And I think that's ultimately what Tank is this sort of a platform for us to pursue like our interest in wine and our interest in culture and art and style and all the other so cool stuff. So I think it just sort of naturally spawned out of us, right? Like Tank is very much of James Harder and to some extent me, right? Yeah. And Beritus, our winemaker, and Paige and Grace, who's on our marketing team, and Keith in the tasting room and JC in the tasting room. It's all the things we want. And we just pursue those things through Tank as a vessel.
And I feel like it's been so well received, and is our age and our counterculture, we always call ourselves like aging indie rockers.
Yeah.
Like people who can afford $60 for a bottle of wine, but also love, Bowie and punk rock and all the things that, stylistically that you're talking about. Like we're getting older and we care about, investing our money where our values lie. We care about, wines are delicious and things are innovative. And I like how you tapped into all of that. I think the time is right. Do you feel like overall Tank has been a success? I mean, I know that means so many different things, especially in a place where production can range from like 10,000 cases to like 1 million cases.
Yeah. No, I mean, like in terms of the success, like we don't have this big pie in the sky dream of we're going to blow this thing up to 1 trillion cases and it's going to be in every BevMo and we're going to have shelf toppers. And like, that's not our dream. It really is just to pursue cool shit, keep the business growing so that we can do more cool shit, take care of everyone on our team. And then hopefully make a little buzz in the wine industry because, it's cool to contribute to the conversation in some new and inspiring way. So in terms of like Tank being a success, like by our merits, it has been an overwhelming success. Like it's been extremely profitable. We grown, double digits year after year after year after year. We've had issues this year with running out of wine. So people are still interested in what we're doing and we're still passionate about what we're doing. And we still have a lot of new dreams and goals. So by that regard, I think it's cool. And, I can't say the feedback has been like overwhelmingly positive because like we get people that come in and they're like, yes, finally this place, this is what I've been looking for in wine. I love wine, but I don't like, my stepmom's wine. This is the place for me. And then we've had people that just don't get it. Right. And I think if you play a more conservative route, like this traditional wineries I talked about, like you usually don't get the negative feedback that we get. Like just this morning, we were going through like our feedback and one person was complaining that our staff's clothing had holes in it. And we're like, oh shit. Like, or like, we'll have people reach out to us. We'll send out an email about a wine that has a porno label on it. And they're like, grasping their pearls. How dare you? I'm going to tell all my friends about this. So, I guess you take the good and the bad. If they're talking about you, it's successful. And, what's the Banksy quote about art, which is, or the one often attributed to him, which is like, good art makes, the comfortable feel, uncomfortable, or the insane feel comfortable. I'm going to figure this quote out, but like it really is cool to see people either react to it in a positive way, which has been most of the time, and react to it in a negative way, which is ultimately we're inspiring something in them.
Yeah, I really like though too that you as much as you value your authenticity, and that's such a buzzword in branding and design. But that's something I feel like you don't see a lot in the wine industry. There's a formula, like you said, there's a formula to being a Napa wine. When you go to the store and you look for a Napa cab, there tends to be a certain comfort zone of what's happening in branding there. And even smaller wineries across, other different AVAs, there's a lot of, well, if we want to look legitimate, we have to have a label that looks like this. Or if we want to, have people respect us, we have to have a tasting room like this. And I love that, what you are doing is you're taking a lot of what's happening in other industries like craft beer, like craft coffee, like, even fast casual. We do a lot of restaurant design here at the studio. And you're taking that, just be yourself and the right customers will find you approach. And I think that needs to happen more in wine. That's kind of why I started Vint, was to bring some of that, find your unique story, find what makes your perfect customer, meet them where they are, serve them with your own interests and like-minded brands. Brands should feel like somebody that you want to sit down and have a beer with. They shouldn't feel like someone who intimidates you or scares you. And we focus on finding that line between, luxury and approachability. And it might be a great product, but it's not a product that you're scared to try. So that's why it resonates with so much of what you guys are doing.
Yeah, I'd ask you one more question on that is, what have been some of the challenges you've seen either from the brands you're working with or the consumers that these wines are ultimately being sold to when you're trying to introduce new ideas or things that sort of are outside the box or aren't within like the traditional wine marketing blueprint?
Yeah, I think that varies 100% based on how big the producer is. To someone who is a newer, younger producer who has a smaller volume, their biggest challenge is investing in design, period. Understanding the value of what it takes to develop, the foundation for the brand. Who are we? What do we stand for? What is that North Star and core tenets? People are so used to just hiring someone they know to do a wine label or, copying what someone else did in their region or a certain style of wine. So that's a barrier, I think, for smaller wineries. For larger wineries, I think there is you feel like you either have to like Oren Swift or you have to be completely in line with what's happening. And it's not entirely true. Folks like Coppola and other people are doing some really interesting designs. But I think it's that fear that if you don't fall in lockstep, you won't be welcomed the same way, especially for those like mid-level grocery brands. You think of what's happening on the shelf at a Total Wine or a Target. There's not a lot of play that distributors are going to go for. They have a certain expectation. So that's kind of a little bit more of where I go with that.
Cool.
In terms of, storytelling, that's one of my favorite things about what you guys do with your packaging and your design. Both the labels and your tasting notes. We make a big production at the studio of, we do tasting Thursdays. Half my staff is remote right now because of Omicron, but on a good day, we're all here on a Thursday and we'll come into the conference room and we'll sit and we'll do a tasting Thursday. And we always I make this big ordeal of like opening up a bottle. Tank is one of our memberships. So I'll go on your website and I'll read the full description. I love the copywriting. And while your labels are usually pretty simple, there's not like too many graphics. Let's say like a photograph or like one collage. Each one definitely has a really clear message at first glance. Like you understand the vibe and the tone and what you're going for. The back label tells the story. I'd love to have you kind of walk us through some of that process and philosophy for your packaging and your labels.
Totally. So I think the first thing to get out of the way is we're not classically trained artists or graphic designers, right? And what we love music, and music has been a huge inspiration of what we do. And what we more like in our labels too are more like album covers, right? They're iconic. So rather than being exercises in compositing a logo and then typography into something that accomplishes all these goals, we want to just treat it like we just want to give you a vibe, right? That you can look at it and you can pick up on the theme of what we're going for here and how the wine experience might be. And we're usually pretty successful in that, but it is very much like a musician's approach to like, this is a visual representation of what this thing should be. So in terms of like processes and storytelling, like I can't say we have this, agile system where we come in and we present these ideas. The one thing we do is that most of our designs are done in-house because it is very much going back to that musician thing. Like it's probably a bad analogy here, but it's like Prince wouldn't hire someone to come in and write his songs and sing his songs for him, right? Like a Prince piece needs to be written and sung and produced and played by Prince, right? And that's how it feels like it comes from the brand. So we just mock stuff up that we're inspired by, or we see something on the street, or we wake up and we have some idea and we write it down and we come in and we just kind of workshop it. Very analog. We cut things up, we paste them up on bottles. And it's usually James who's leading a lot of those things, and I'll do a couple of them. Or, my role in a lot of cases is to take James's vision on something and make it like a, visual representation of what he's dreamt up. So if it's like, hey, we have this idea, we want someone, leaning out of a Trans Am with no shirt on with their arms up. It's like, how do we make that happen? How do I make that happen or realize that vision? So in terms of like the storytelling, it is very much like once you see it, you can know the whole story, right? And so the way we write our tasting notes, which, I'm happy you like them. Not everyone reads them because they're, tasting notes, but the people that do seem to give us good feedback on them. But we go to our marketing team, we say, here's the label. And either they get what it's about, even if it's sort of like a high level vibe, and maybe they have some questions about like the intent of it, or maybe they aren't completely informed historically on like what this thing represents. And usually they do some sort of deep dive and they'll tell a little story in it. So there's kind of what inspired us to make this, how the label and the wines sort of inform each other. And then a little bit of like book reporty stuff about like, here's the history of, roller derby, or here's the history of, I'm looking around my desk here to see what we got here. Here's the history of this particular style of dirt bike, or here is the history of the golden age of porno. Like it's a cool thing to tell. And, for the people that want to go deeper and want to learn more about like what inspired us, we're able to tell those stories.
And I love
how about you?
I just love how your labels aren't necessarily about the grape in the bottle. And a lot of wineries are afraid to do that. And when we work with clients, a lot of times like, well, you're like, tell us about this wine or tell us about the story of the brand. And they're like, well, this is the terroir and this is the varietal and how we farmed it. And this was the year and it's juicy or dry. And they're so focused on function that they don't get into brand and story and fantasy and fairy tale. And I always tell them, like, look at 19 Crimes. Like 19 Crimes is about the Australian criminal diaspora. It has nothing to do with what's in the bottle.
Yeah.
It's about a broader emotion. And I think when you have as many releases as you guys have and every single one is different, like just riding that line of emotion and riding that line of like, this is just the culture that we love. And it's so organic because it is just the cultural touch points that you guys love. It builds a broader brand, in a branding sense, as opposed to just a function and more like product statements.
Yeah. So I'll say this, like, that sort of like utility design where you're trying to check all the boxes for the consumer, which is, at this point, it's like ingredient labeling. Is it vegan? Is it gluten free? Is it no sugar added? What does it taste like? Where does it come from? Like, you get lots of things where you have like the, typography in a certain way where it's very much looks like it's from an old like Dewey Decimal card from the library. Like, I get those things; those serve their purpose in the marketplace because you were competing against a large subset of producers, and you were trying to inform people so that people can make the most educated decision on their buying purchase, like buying habits. So, with us, we've sort of unintentionally protected ourselves from that, and we're direct to consumer only. All of our wine is sold directly through our tasting room or through our subscription services or online. So we don't really have to play that game, and we can sort of go play in our own little blue ocean, which is much smaller, but it is informed by people like, they have an emotion, they have an emotional reaction to the label, or they see something cool, or, I think what works for us is a lot of the times, or most of the time, so the label and the wine inside are good matches for each other, right?
Yeah.
So rather than tell them exactly what it tastes like, oh, this is going to smell like apricots, and it's going to taste like, fresh citrus and white spice, like we can just sort of show them what it looks like. So if it's a kind of a groovy laid back label, there's a good chance that the Gruner Veltliner inside is going to be groovy and laid back and easy drinking as well. And to give our consumers credit, like they pick up on that pretty quickly. So that's been our take on it. I can't say we've thought through it as much as you just did there, but you've very succinctly kind of summarized, what we do.
Yeah. Well, you have 20 years of Tank almost. I've got 20 years of branding under my belt. And I think it's just, that's what I find so attractive about Tank is that you're not afraid to move beyond the function of what's in the bottle. Right now I'm enjoying your Kid Vicious. I don't usually drink this early on a work day, but I really appreciate your, who is that on the label, by the way?
Oh,
a random.
No, it's not. It's not a random. It's Ronald Reagan.
Oh my gosh, I couldn't even see him because you guys put black over his lips and added dark.
This is a good example. So like, I wouldn't say this is our like most in-depth label that we've made, but it sort of fuses together what we like, which is one, punk rock. So like the kind of studded vicious thing is an homage to, the early punk rock scene and Sid Vicious and just that pink and gold and studded off kiltered aesthetic. And then Ronald Reagan, who was the president of the United States, but before that was basically a B actor in Hollywood, did some Westerns like that. We like subverting things like that as well, because we think it's an interesting conversation. And it's been an interesting conversation to have because we've had this conversation with people before, which is like, you go back to like, think of it as Back to the Future. And he's explained how Marty McFly has explained to somebody that Ronald Reagan's an actor, and they're like, Ronnie Reagan, the TV actor.
Yeah.
But we're having that literal conversation today because so many people were born after Ronald Reagan was in presidency. He's maybe not as relevant as is now. People that are familiar will share their opinions on him and his policies, which is a cool piece of conversation to have. Probably one that most wineries don't want to invite, but we're game for it. And we just sort of had fun with it.
Yeah. And so for those of you listening on audio, we'll have photos of this on the website, along with a slew of my other favorite Tank Garage labels. But this one is a black and white image of Ronald Reagan dressed as a cowboy, wearing, his belt and his gun holster. And then they've got the word vicious on a hot pink stripe with a bunch of that kind of like those light bulb letters.
The circus lighting, and then we have like Kiss makeup on them.
I was gonna say, you also very respectfully put a Kiss face on top of him, so the stars. And anyway, take a look at the website, go and check it out, unbent.studio.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 more questions for you, and then I'll wrap it up. You guys are blowing TikTok out of the water. I know you just got a big nod on Wine Enthusiasts for having grown to almost 30,000 TikTok followers. There are so many wineries, and honestly, even me, who don't really know why TikTok, how TikTok, what is the return on investment? Is it worth it? I know that the owners over at Lulabella Winery, or Luvabella, they just said that they were like committed to doing TikTok every single day. And she's like, oh my God, I'm spending 2 hours a day creating this content. Like, so just give us your TikTok rundown. This is really aimed towards anyone at a winery listening who wants to better understand, how to leverage it. Obviously, it's a little bit different for your brand because you're so counterculture, but any advice, or can you give me the background of like how long you've been on it, how you've made it a success?
Yeah. So I think if you just look at social media and social platforms, I don't think I need to convince anybody of the power of those tools. And if you look at something like Instagram, Instagram as it exists today is a very bloated, very complicated platform, and it's a completely different piece of software than it was 10 years ago, when it was literally just a chronological feed of people's photos of their friends going on vacations with shitty filters over them. And I think a lot of people in the past 5 years have realized the advantages of being on Instagram, and probably wish they would have been on it earlier, when they could have maybe secured a larger following, or a more authoritative following on Instagram. So we just want to make sure that we are spreading the word about Tank Garage Winery on the platforms that are emerging and that people are using to either connect with other people, connect with brands, learn more about things they're interested in. And TikTok is obviously one that's popped up in probably the last 2 or 3 years here in the US. Um, the interesting thing about TikTok and all these sort of algorithmically fed social media tools is it's no longer about curating who you follow. It's about their algorithms trying to figure out, like, what the user may want to see.
Mhm.
And so that's been a big shift for us. But I think the important thing for us is we realize that people are using TikTok, especially younger people. You go back probably to when you and I grew up. It's like, where did you find out about new music, Scout? Probably
Oh,
like the radio and MTV, maybe through a
yeah.
friend or two.
Columbia House.
Yeah, yeah, something like that, right?
Am I
And
aging
so
myself?
the way I'd like explain like TikTok now is it's like MTV meets magazines meets basically everything from our childhood for younger people today. So these are people that are in Gen Zs and younger millennials, and even older millennials. This is where people come to be entertained, to discover stuff, to learn about new music. So we think there's something there where we can have a presence, and we can entertain people, and we can attract people to our brand. In terms of like the ROI, like, I'm not going to sit here and say like it's as mature as a uh, platform, or the funnel is as well defined as it is with Instagram, where it's like they come in, we serve them an ad, they go to our website, they sign up for a mailing list, we trigger an automation, then they buy from that. Like, it doesn't work that way. I think it's more of just creating a presence so that you can have brand awareness. And as the platform begins to mature, we'll figure out ways to monetize that, just as we did with Instagram and Facebook and LinkedIn and all the sort of predecessors to it. So what we do is this: we just, again, try to do cool shit. What's something that's fun or interesting we could put on here? Harvest was a gold mine of content for us, because we have stuff coming in every single day from July through November. We're doing crazy foot stomping and carbonic maceration, and we're making sparkling wines, and we're doing crystal ferments, and we have fucking cool people in the cellar, and we get silly. So we just do cool shit. We put it up there, and the algorithm will determine whether the people like it or not. And there's been lots of feedback. Like, our most popular one, we've had a couple million views on this one. That's like foot stomping, which for whatever reason uh, got picked up on like the people that are either way into feet or disgusted by feet algorithm. And there's been some crazy conversations on there, but like, people are talking about it. So I think it's something we're going to continue to have fun with, and continue to learn and adapt with. And maybe there'll be something of more substance someday with it that will be significantly impactful on our business. But until then, I don't want to just dismiss it, because I know that, one, lots of people are on it, and two, we have a lot of fun participating in it, which is probably the most important part. So yeah, that's what we do, and we try to create as much content as possible, because with these algorithms, the qualitative thing sort of takes a back seat to the quantitative thing, which is, you know, quantity is objective and quality is subjective, and the algorithm will determine which is the good stuff. So that's just been our approach with TikTok.
Yeah, I feel like it's so counterintuitive to marketers. Like, no, this has to be so thoughtful, this has to be so strategic, and let's have that quality versus quantity reversed. I think that's part of my own personal discomfort with TikTok is like, will people understand what I'm trying to do? How careful do I have to be about it? Like my Instagram is so quaff, because I just feel like we have to have this certain presentation of the brand. And I can see how brands would be afraid to like unbutton their top button when it comes to TikTok, or even afraid that the people who could even afford their wines are in that audience on TikTok. I feel like it's such a younger demographic, but I see the most value in what you said is about this is a new medium. And if you don't get in now, you're going to regret it later. Yeah. And let's watch how it grows and let's learn how to monetize that. So I think that's a really great piece of advice. Be one of the first people to really get into this so that you are an elder in 5 years. And are able to
I would encourage, short form video is sort of the way forward in the foreseeable future, like short of metaverses and augmented reality, because people's attention spans are short. You can make videos that are really easy to watch, but are very information dense. Learning the skill of storytelling in 15 seconds and learning editing and cadence and language and memes, I think is a really valuable skill. So like when I look at younger people that are on TikTok now, is like they have all these amazing editing and storytelling skills that normally you'd have to go down, like you'd have to go to USC and you'd have to study film and you'd learn editing and you'd watch all these Godard and Kurosawa movies to like learn. But these kids are doing it right now every single day. And I think it's important for us as marketers, especially people like our age, to understand is that this is becoming part of the language in which the next consumer will be able to talk about things that they're into and relate to brands that they're into. And if you don't speak this language, this kind of like meme editing, TikTok-y dance language, you're going to have a big hole on your marketing game. So it's fun for us to learn more about that. And it's fun for us to learn more about our emerging consumers because those are the things they value. So I think it's cool. You should look into it if you haven't.
And that's the entire wine industry's challenge right now. How do we capture younger audiences? How do we make sure that we're able to kind of bring wine to younger audiences? I was just watching the Rob McMillan State of the Wine Industry report this morning, Silicon Valley Bank, and he had a slide about, they interviewed people and they said, what do you bring to a party? And for people who are 65 and older, for boomers, it was like, I can't remember the exact percentage, but it was like 40% would bring wine. And they went down to just 45 to 55 and it cut in half. Yeah. It was just like, it had to have a beer. So I think, that whole idea of like, how does the wine industry not become a dinosaur? How do we connect with younger audiences? Diversity, being authentic, not being afraid to stand out from the crowd, TikTok, like those are all things I think could be addressed so widely at the industry. So
this is good timing for this because so this morning, the Silicon Valley Bank, which for those who aren't in the wine industry, they do these aggregated reports on data where they measure trends in wine and they measure from everything from demographic information to sales information. And they had some of their information released this morning, and they had like a live video stream where they talked about it. And one of the key insights was that baby boomers and even like older Gen X people are moving out of their like peak buying years. And younger people from Gen Z and millennials are not necessarily following the same wine purchasing journeys as their parents did, which is concerning to the wine industry because we could potentially be seeing the number of consumers start to shrink, for the first time in a long time. So also coinciding with this is that today and tomorrow, this is in January 19th and 20th, there's the direct-to-consumer wine symposium, which is a big deal, probably the biggest event for people in the U.S. for wineries to come together and talk about their challenges and experiences marketing wine in the direct consumer wine space. So that's going on this morning. And I actually gave a keynote talk this morning about the language of wine. And a big pillar of that was talking about moving away, or at least creating room for new types of language to talk about wine, because we've always been set in these like really formal conservative ways of discussing wine. But now we're getting to an era where we need more consumers, which is going to require us to go after a more diverse subset of people that aren't, the traditional, highly affluent white people. And so it's going to require us to adapt how we communicate with people, the language we use, the authorities and gatekeepers and all these different segments of wine. Because if we don't do that, we're not going to attract younger people. And then the wine segments is going to shrivel up and die because there is so much competition, more competition. The wines that people's parents drank are uninteresting to younger people. And not only that, they're too expensive. Napa Valley Cab starts at $100 these days, which is kind of cost prohibitive. So I think there's a lot of like really interesting conversations going on to which is like, how do we retain and attract younger people? And what are the sort of components we need to evolve into so that we are more open to a diverse variety of people and voices in the wine industry? But that's a huge tangent that we could probably talk about all day too.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming to my podcast after your illustrious keynote speech. I appreciate it.
Well, in all fairness, we recorded it in December, but
okay.
Yeah, you got a fresh ed today.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that. And everyone should go check that out. Really, I was hoping to get the Symposium this year, but I've got 2 little kids who I don't want to expose to COVID right now. So it's hard to travel. Awesome. Okay. I'm going to put your feet to the fire, Ed. My big question I try to wrap up all the podcasts with is really, your best possible advice in terms of, talking to other wineries. What is your best piece of advice for increasing sales and ultimately moving wine?
I'll give you sort of a high level answer, which should be the foundation for anything you do within the wine space or any business that, someone's interested in starting, which is, marketing is the process of standing out and not fitting in. So if you are entering the wine world or you're already in the wine world, you need to take a deep look at your motivations and understand why you're doing what you're doing, what you're adding to the conversation, and then what you're doing that other people are either not doing or are unwilling to do, because that will be your core differentiator. And that will be how you find your audience and your customers and build affinity and loyalty over the long haul. So in terms of doing that, if you're starting a new brand, make sure you're doing something that's different and unique, but something you're truly passionate and believe in. Because I hate using this word because it's douchey, but like authenticity is key, but like authenticity that's truly earned and not just sort of assigned. And if you do those sort of things, you can follow all the other best practices. You can set up customer journeys and email automations and do social media, because it will just sort of be grown from the fertile bed of which is your unique brand and wine story. So I'm not going to give you some like, you really got to do SMS messaging, or you really got to do like drip campaigns. My thing is take a look at your brand, figure out what it is that makes you unique, and then go all in on it, because that will be your biggest strength in terms of moving more wine and selling more wine, in my opinion.
Amen. That is exactly what we like to do too. Ed, thank you so much. Guys, we've been talking to the amazing Ed Feuchuk of the Farm Collective and Tank Garage Winery, amongst many other wineries. And where can people learn more about you?
Oh my gosh. You can learn more about me on
Besides
OnlyFans or my Twitch account. But realistically, if you want to learn more about Tank Garage Winery, go follow us at Tank Garage Winery or at Tank Winery on TikTok and Instagram, or at tankgaragewinery.com. Or if you're in Calistoga, give us a call. I don't know. You know how to search shit on Google. You'll find us.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ed. I love talking to you today. I'm totally fangirling. Everyone else, thank you so much for listening to this episode of Vinted. And for more photos of Tank Garage's labels and awesome designs, check out vint.studio, or of course their website. Thanks all. Bye.
Tune in for the next Vinted. Subscribe today. For future episodes, marketing advice, and more, follow me on Instagram at Scout Driscoll. Learn more about Vint's design and branding services for wineries at www.vint.studio.